Hey everybody, it's Mike Sherwood and welcome to my YouTube channel, Don't Waste Your Life. We're reminded to be present, to be happy, and to be thankful. If you're new to the channel, I subscribe below. And if you're returning, thanks for coming back. In this week's episode, we will be going through the second book in the book review series that I was talking about, where we would go through The Stillness is the Key by Ryan Holiday. So same author, different book. I've read this book more than 75 times. I really enjoy it. Can't recommend it enough. Go find it on Amazon. You can find it on Ryan Holiday's website, the Daily Stoic store. You can also find it on your local bookstores. It's a great book. You can find it on the Kindle. You can find it anywhere. So this is the book, and it's definitely one of my favorite books, and I review it quite often when I'm struggling with different things. So highly recommend this book. And so today we're going to go through a summary of kind of my thoughts on the book, give a little bit of insight. I will also share some links on some different books that I recommend outside of, Stillness is Key and Obstacle is the Way. So I'll go through that as well. And I actually will probably link to some videos that actually show some of the book summaries of those books, just to kind of explain the various ideas. But I also recommend checking those books out yourself, just because I think it's best to walk through the books yourself rather than just taking somebody else's summary. Same thing with this. My goal in making this summary is to get you interested in the book. You go buy the book. I'm no benefit for me, but I'm trying to benefit and help you. One other thing to point out is that Ryan Holiday also has the Daily Stoic podcast, and he has the Daily Stoic newsletter. So I recommend checking both those out. I can't say I read and look at them every day, but when I'm on the go, I may listen to the podcast, or I might check out the email before I start. So with that, on to the book summary. Same as last time, I'm going to do a one-line, one-sentence summary, and I'm going to read it here. It's from Luke Raleigh, and I really like his summary, which is: stillness is the key, gives you the tools to harness the power of slowing down your body and mind for less distractions, better self-control, and above all, a happier and more peaceful life. I really like his summary, but I actually want to add something to that as well. Similar to how in the Bible, where there's a lot of points where Jesus is in a still moment by himself with his Father in prayer or meditation, is that it's important to find those moments, find those times. And as I read the Bible, what I love about the Bible is that every time I go back to it, the key concepts come back. It reminds me of those particular things and how important it is to revisit them. That's why even like this book, I revisit so many times, because the advice is timeless. A Bible is obviously very timeless. And so many times when I review, different words in scripture, it affects me in different ways. It's very important to keep those kinds of key concepts in mind. And that's what creates the stillness, is being present and being aware of those things. And then the three leg of the stool with the mind, the spirit, and the body, which we'll talk about more. My overall key quote for this whole book is something that I got from my father. And his version is slightly different than this one. I believe that this saying actually came from the Navy SEALs, if I'm not mistaken. And my dad says something similar, and which is that slow is smooth and smooth is fast. When I think about this, I think about this in auto car racing with cornering. And so when you're going into a corner, there's different parts of how you manage that corner. So when I was growing up, my dad actually told me the story about how you drive into a corner, how as a race car driver you do the apex. So the idea is, if you go into the corner too fast, you carry too much speed into the corner, you're going to slide off into the grass, or you're just going to exit very poorly. So the idea is that if you're slow in, you'll be fast out. If you're fast in, you'll be slow out. And I have a diagram that I'll show here in the video that you'll see that very clearly spells this out. This is also partnered with the friction circle. And I actually learned about this when I was probably 5 or 6, as my dad recalls It was when we were at Watkins Glen, and I was asking him about cornering. I was asking him about acceleration, deceleration. So I guess I was a very curious kid. And so my dad told me about this and explained this. And so there'll be another circle here that is the friction circle, and it's allocated as 100%. So the way you think about it is any way, shape, or form, they have the acceleration, deceleration, left turning, right turning. You can only allocate 100%. There are ways to go beyond 100%, but that's outside the scope of this conversation. So you just assume this. So the idea is to optimize for any of that. You'd want to do only one activity. That'd be the best way to do it. You can do multiple, but then that means you're not going to be as effective in those other areas. So what would this actually look like? In the corner, as you're going into it, you would be hitting the brake 100%. So you'd be trying to stop. That'd be step one. Step two would be, as you're getting ready to go into the corner, you would start to coast or trail brake, which is more to maintain or scrub off speed if you're going in a little fast. Then the rest of that, so let's say that's 20%. 80% of that, you would actually be cornering, you'd be turning. And then as you're going through the corner, you would be starting to go to step three, which is maybe you have 40% that you're hitting the accelerator now. And then the other 60% is kind of correcting the car and lining it up as it exits the corner. Then the final step is hitting it 100% acceleration. The reason why you can't immediately go to 100% acceleration, step three, is because you're lining up how you're exiting the car. And in sports cars, obviously people that race will understand this a lot more. And this kind of relates to the overall concept of the friction wheel, is that if you try to stomp on the gas, you're going to lose traction. It's just going to spin out and you're going to lose control. So when you're doing these different things, you've got to be able to manage it. This is how I think about all this has to come together. So in racing, I actually believe that you have to bring mind, spirit, and body together. And so like other sports like golf, I believe that you can actually just have the mind and then the body being in sync without the spirit, and you could still execute very well. But I feel like in auto racing, you need to have that all working together. Going back to the summary that Luke had, he has some key ideas that I really liked, and I'm just gonna borrow those from him. Number one is, no matter what kind of crisis you might be in, slowing down is always going to help you get through it better. Totally agree. Allow more silence in your life if you want better peace and clarity of mind. And number three is, work in moderation and embrace your need for sleep if you want to be at your best every day. I would say just not sleep, but meditation, just listening to your body is super important. I think it goes without saying. We're going to go into the mind is the first section. So the domain of the mind, there were 13 days in John F. Kennedy's presidency that could change the fate of the known world. And I believe that this was actually in 1962 when this was happening. Known simply as the Cuban Missile Crisis, Russia moved missiles to Cuba that could strike basically anywhere on the east coast of the US. They basically said that this was for defensive purposes only, but obviously we knew otherwise. Many of John F. Kennedy's advisors recommended aggression should be met with aggression, that we should just go and attack or preemptively strike. But John F. Kennedy remembered from his last foray of listening to his advisors, the CIA actually pressured him into moving forward the Bay of Pigs invasion. And, we saw how that turned out. It just did not turn out well. And so at this time, he was actually reading a book called The Guns of August that helped him be at peace and understand, what to do. So in this particular situation, in this book, the World War I leaders actually were overconfident in their abilities, and they decided to do certain things. And once they did those things, they couldn't undo them. And this was stressed in JFK's mind that he had to be calm, he had to be focused, and be able to find a way to problem solve from this. Basically, be the stillest man in the room when all this chaos was going around him. As a leader, our responsibility more than anything is to slow down and to provide the best decisions with the information that we have at that time. So JFK was actually doodling in his notebook his presidential stationery and just drawing missiles and writing down keywords, leaders, and he was drawing sailboats, different things. The idea was he was trying to relax and still himself. And partway through, he says, "We are demanding the removal of these warheads." And that led to the blockade and the quarantine, because they didn't want to call it a blockade because that would be more hostile. So they called it a quarantine of Cuba. So when they did this, within I think it was 11 days, Khrushchev actually wrote a letter to Kennedy saying, "Hey, we were both tied to a rope, and there was a knot in the middle, and if either of us kept pulling, it would be war." What happened with this is Kennedy was able to be calm enough and relaxed enough to see everything that was going on, to be still, and to give Khrushchev the chance to think. He gave him margin to think. If he met him with aggression, we would have had a different story. Honestly, the world would not be the same if that happened. John F. Kennedy and his advisors actually saved the world in a way, is the way I think about it. So in these times, we must be fully present, empty our minds of any of these preconceptions, take our time, sit quietly and reflect, reject distraction, weigh advice against the counsel of our convictions, and deliberate without being paralyzed. Those are the key things in the mind that you have to keep in mind. So what did I learn from all this? Simple. It's very much like what we talked about in The Obstacle is the Way, is that cooler heads will prevail. While your enemy is making a mistake and losing their whatever, you are able to stay calm and be able to keep things under control. So the next area will be on spirit. And this is actually one of my favorite stories. It's about Tiger Woods, who I consider to be the stillest man on earth, or he was. The way he could physically and mentally be able to close everything out and to bring those things, two things in the unison, it was just beautiful. Unfortunately, Tiger was pretty weak in his spirit. And a lot of this had to do with his upbringing, honestly. I actually really like what Ryan Holiday says here. He says, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, we grow up to be like our daddy after all." Earl Woods, Tiger's father, turned Tiger into a cold-blooded assassin. Basically, Tiger was unstoppable when he was on the golf course. He was able to still his mind. He was able to bring his body into perfect unison. He just stalked his prey, is the way I think about it. You may be asking, how did Earl Woods do this? He would cheat when he was playing against Tiger. He would cough. He would throw his keys at him. He would say really mean things that I'm not going to repeat just to get a rise out of him. And Tiger said, that's all it was, just trying to get a rise out of me. And it was wild. Yeah, it was wild. Like, who does that to their kid? I just think that starry-eyed parents, and actually they talk about this in the book, starry-eyed parents see that their son or daughter could become the best at whatever that may be. They're willing to sacrifice all that for that. And honestly, it wasn't just Tiger Woods' his dad, Earl. It was also his mom. She said, "If you embarrass me, I will beat you." Basically, his parents were very complex. So he had very weak examples of people for parents. His moral compass was out of whack. So during this training with Earl Woods, there was a special keyword that Tiger could say in order to stop Earl from, physically and mentally torturing Tiger. And interestingly enough, the word was enough, like the E word. And that's actually what they start calling it. It was like a swear word between the two of them. They would say the E word. That's how they would talk about it. I'm going to be honest, there's a lot more to this story. I recommend you check out Ryan's book. I don't do it justice compared to how Ryan explains it. But think about this. Tiger had a very poor example. He had a beautiful wife at home. He had a beautiful family. He had everything you could ever want, or so it seems. But he just was broken. And so from there, he just kind of jumped into sex and other stuff. He had a lot of struggles. And even he can never truly be happy when he would win. Like there wasn't joy. I think there was one time when His son Charlie was there, and this was after the event that happened. And that was the one time when he was super happy. But you could see Tiger, he often didn't look like he was happy when he won. It was always like that was the expectation. It was just pressure. So shortly following this, you know what happened. A thrown golf club, a broken window, and Tiger sprawled on the driveway. The stillest man, Tiger Woods, was still no more after his secret life, had come out. Those that seek stillness should focus on some of these things. Developing a strong moral compass. Obviously, Tiger didn't have that. Remove themselves from situations that create envy or other negative emotions. It's just not worth it. Come to terms with painful memories and painful things that happened in your childhood. You can no longer control that. It was outside. You got to be able to move on. Practice gratitude and appreciation for everything that's around you. Cultivate friendships and other relationships because they're important. Place your hope and belief in a power that's greater than you. You must understand that you are not in control, that there is a greater power beyond you that is in control of your life. And understand that there will never be enough, and that unchecked, hedonic, treadmill kind of behaviors will just kind of always have you thirsty for more. It's just not worth it. The person that has enough is truly happy and content. I want to point out one more story that I really enjoyed in this area around conquering your anger. But before that, I want to talk through a quote. He that is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he that ruleth his spirit, that he that taketh a city. Proverbs 16:32. This means that a person that is in control of their anger and emotions is a person that should be truly valued versus somebody who has great military exploits. The way I think about this, and especially in business, it's not just about what gets done, but it's the how you actually go about doing that. That's super important. In 2009, Michael Jordan was inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame as one of the best players, if not the best player of all time. You would expect that he would have a very interesting story to tell, and he did. But think about some of his accolades that he had. 6-time NBA champion, 6 times NBA Finals MVP, 5 times NBA Most Valuable Player, 14 NBA All-Stars, Olympic gold medals. You name it, he'd won it. But Michael Jordan still had something to prove. He had a story to tell here. But first, Jordan led his team to one of the most dominant sports performances in 15 years, where he won those 6 championships. And if I remember right, he had the three-peats, which was crazy that he was able to do that. I mean, it's not just MJ, it's his team, but that's just incredible sports accomplishment. While many people may be trying to compare him to the likes of Steph Curry or LeBron James in this current generation, it's very hard to compare people across generations. I think the MJ debate versus LeBron debate will rage on for another 15 years because many people did not see them both in their prime and be able to see the way the game was at that time. So it's very hard to compare. Anyways, MJ was great. He was. His game was beautiful. His conduct, not so much. In Jordan's Hall of Fame speech, he originally planned to just go up there and accept his award and walk away and say thank you. And that was it. That was all he was going to do. But he had something to prove, something to tell people. What ensued after that was a strange and weird kind of situation where Jordan went through every slight he'd ever got throughout his career. He talked through everything in detail, from getting cut as a freshman when another person also tried out for the varsity squad who was a senior that got that playing time rather than him. He actually invited him to the Hall of Fame induction to just witness, to tell people, to him and to that coach, you made a mistake, dude, by selecting him. People that are close to Jordan understood what he was trying to do, but the way it got conveyed was that anger could be used as a tool to move you forward. It was just kind of strange. I mean, Michael Jordan has nothing to prove. He was the best basketball player on the planet, period, in my opinion. And he's just incredible. But similar, like Tiger is like not, Tiger was not a good father, not a good husband. MJ was not really a good teammate in many cases. He hurt some of his, teammates. It's kind of crazy. Every time somebody slighted him or didn't think he was good enough, it just gave him fuel to move forward. And what was interesting about it was when Tiger saw the inauguration to the Hall of Fame, Tiger says, I get it. That's what it takes to be as good as MJ. You're always looking for an edge. You're always looking for a way to get yourself going. Yeah, those guys are two peas in a pod, if you ask me. But if you think about this, there's other champions that are out there that win an awful lot without being a jerk or being angry or just not being pleasant to be around. Look at Tom Brady. He wins a lot. I don't like Tom Brady because, I'm a Buffalo Bills fan, but still, he wins a lot and he's a great competitor. And from what I see, he's a good teammate. So just saying that there are different ways to approach this. Anger doesn't have to be the way or the fuel. Physical. So I have a quote here first. If a person puts even one measure of effort into following ritual and the standards of righteousness, he will get back twice as much. Zunzi. This section will be about building a routine. Building a consistent routine into your day is important. Fred Rogers would wake up at 5 a.m. and go to his local pool and swim laps. Prior to that, for an hour, he'd be in meditation and prayer. When he would go out to go swim his laps, before he got into the pool, he'd weigh himself, and it was important that it said 143 pounds. And when he jumped into the pool, he would say to himself, Jubilate Deo, in his mind. And then once he came out of the water, he was bathed and refreshed and to start the new day. That was part of his routine. It's very important to be consistent about that. So 3 times a week, I wake up at 4:47 in the morning to start my day, to get ready to go to play badminton. I arrive at the facility around 5:20. I stretch and start doing my warm-ups around 5:30, and we're ready to play around 5:35, 5:40. And this has been consistent for the last 8 years. Same routine, same players, same everything. My body is accustomed and attuned to this, and it's very consistent. I don't even have to think about it. It just happens. In fact, on those days when I don't go, I still end up usually waking up at that time because my body's so trained to that. And I will say that if I don't go for these training sessions for a couple of times, I definitely notice that my mental and physical well-being, my spirit just feels different. So it's very important to follow these routines to build this stillness into your life. So one other sports story, and unfortunately, this is about Patrick Mahomes. And as a Buffalo Bills fan, this is very tough for me to understand. But I found this data very fascinating. I want to share it with you. You'll see a graph here that shows Patrick Mahomes' heart rate in the AFC Championship game against the Buffalo Bills. Unfortunately, the Bills lost, but what was interesting about this is you could see Patrick Mahomes' heart rate spiked up to 191 when he did his rushing touchdown. But then usually when it continued to spike was when he was not in control and he didn't even have the ball. So it wasn't he was on the field. What was interesting about this is that Patrick Mahomes, worked himself in these stressful environments and he became so accustomed to it that he was able to control his heart rate and just how he was showing up. Similar like in the Obstacles Away where we talked about the astronauts where they were able to practice and control their heart rate. It's very similar. And what was interesting about this was when you look at the second graph, you'll actually see that during the pre-snap or in the huddle, Mahomes' heart rate was the lowest because he was in flow state. He was able to see everything that was going on. He was relaxed. The only time that he was not relaxed was when the other team had the ball, or the other team scored, or different things happened. The idea behind this is as you build these routines and you're in these stressful environments, you can get yourself ready for this, that you're equipped to it, and you can overcome it very easily. So what are my key takeaways from this book? I would say you'd focus on the mind, the spirit, and the body. Those 3 things, those 3 legs of the stool are super important. And I think what's actually interesting about these is by bringing these into unison and harmony, that they actually allow you to die well. I know it sounds weird, but the idea is as you bring these three items into concert, you bring them in together, it helps you understand that things are outside your control. And, tomorrow you could get cancer. Tomorrow a tree could drop on you. Tomorrow this or that could happen to you. And the only thing you can control is how you respond. And by you being still and relaxed about it, you can control how you're going to respond very easily in those situations. We must know that all of us are given a terminal diagnosis. We're all going to die someday. Memento mori. That's what's going to happen. It's important to understand how we use that time, how we value that time, and how we approach it in our given life. It's important. And actually, by by having clarity on these three areas, I actually believe that it helps improve your ability to be present. So, as one of the pillars of the show, being present is super important. But what I would say this is it gives clarity. So, my mind is emptied, my heart is full of love, and my body is busy. I am at peace. I hope you all enjoyed this. Take care.